Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the fake rich. What does that mean? What is this growing trend amongst millennials? And I think we're all subject to this in one way, shape, or form. And so I want to take, four biblical principles that are time-tested, unchanging principles that we can apply to this modern financial situation that we find ourselves in, and trying to combat how do we combat falling into this trend of being the fake rich. Okay. But if this is your first time joining us, welcome. My name is Michael Foley. I'm a certified financial planner and certified student loan professional, and I'm also the son of two doctors, and really developed Lifestyle Creep to really come alongside our healthcare workers in our society and help them to get more educated in the financial area of their life and help them to make more intentional decisions in their finances. So we're very excited to dive in with you today. So I want to dive in and take a look at this article that I found on NASDAQ, and it's titled "Fake Rich: New Trend Growing Influence Among Millennials and Killing Money." It's a shocking, title here, and it just immediately brought me to the Proverbs. Proverbs 13:7 says, "There are those that pretend to be rich but are poor, and there are those that pretend to be poor but have great wealth." And so it's just an interesting, correlation, because I think these, this is, principles that are, thousands of years ago that are applying to, this new article that we just saw. And we're seeing these trends continue coming up as it's just our human nature, right? And so let's break down the article, because I think what they talked about is, trying to identify, how do you identify what is the fake rich? What does that mean? So they quantified it and essentially described them as people that are living beyond one's means, so spending more than they're making, having a social media obsession, so people that are obsessed with social media need to document everything that can kind of show their wealth, and then lack of financial education, and then impulsive spending are big ones, right? And then they also talked a lot about debt usage, and they found that 48% of millennials have incurred debts to buy worthy possessions to keep up with their friends' lifestyles. So I thought that was pretty crazy, because it's, I think we're all kind of exposed to this in one way, shape, or form, and this is kind of the fake it till you make it kind of mentality. And I was totally subject to this, and it brings me back to when I was first getting into the business 8 to 10 years ago. And I remember getting told that you need to fake it till you make it, and you need to have the nice car, you need to wear the nice suit and tie and cufflinks, and you need to look the part, and and that's, you gotta be a part of all these different clubs and things like that, so that you can fake it until you make it. And I look back, I ran a Porsche club for years, and I didn't even own a Porsche, right? And I had a Camaro, and I've really kind of found my identity in my car at a certain level, and so that I kind of latched onto that. But fortunately, I've kind of pulled out of that, but still battle with with the car domain and other areas of my life, and so I'm excited to kind of talk through some different ways we can combat that and how I've overcome some of these things as well. But so the first thing that we want to talk about is, I wanted to go through four different things that we can use to combat this growing trend of, trying to keep up with the Joneses, essentially. And a lot of people are getting themselves into jeopardizing financial positions to, either taking out debt or just spending more than they're making, or doing other things to keep up with the desires of what they want, or their image, or what they think that they should be spending, how they should be spending money, or what other people are telling them they should be spending money on. And so unfortunately, we're in a constant battle with marketers, and so we need to have some ways to kind of sift through what should we be doing and how much is enough for us to be looking at. Okay, so the first thing is we want to always spend less than you earn. Seems pretty straightforward, pretty simple, right? And I think everyone kind of knows that at a certain level or agrees with that. But I think what's happening right now is that debt is making it's very easy to get access to debt, and so what sometimes it kind of dilutes what people can identify as affordable or not affordable. And so a lot of times the affordability questions are, can I afford that down payment and that monthly payment? Not necessarily the cost of the entire asset, right? I just think, even buying like a Peloton right now, right? It's a pretty big investment, but when you use a firm, it's only $100 a month or something along those lines. But I think it's really a slippery slope if we get into the habit of just looking at what is the monthly payment on things, because we always want to make sure that when we're taking out a debt, the actual thing that we're buying should be worth what we're paying for it, right? And so it's got to make economic sense at a certain level. But sometimes when we continue getting in the habits, yes, we can afford the monthly payment, but maybe that thing that we're buying, is actually not worth what all those payments plus maybe the interest that we're paying on that, right? So we got to be very careful with that. And so, it kind of brings me back to the proverb that says, whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. And so I always come back to that proverb because, I think in this habit right now kind of culture, and we want to get there, we want to experience that, we want that taste of that success right now. And I think that's something that debt has made it all too easy for people to get a taste of that. But really, it's kind of works counterintuitive, because if you build up more debt, then we have more payments, which makes it harder for you to spend less than you earn, which is really the only way that we're going to be able to meet long-term goals, is if we're spending less than we earn and we're able to accumulate assets, right? So you can see it's kind of a cyclical downhill cycle with that. So it's gonna take a while, and we have to build little by little over time, and that's how we attain these goals. But so we'd be cautious around that. So number one, spend less than you earn. Okay. The next one, number two, is change your environment. So this is something that reminds me of the proverb, one who walks with wise people will be wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm. And so this is something that we really want to make sure, who are we hanging out with, where are we going on a regular basis, and how are they or those places influencing our decisions. So, social media, I think this article even talks quite a bit about, has a dramatic effect on, social comparison and, that wanting to keep up with the Joneses. And so it's really important that if we need to reduce our social media intake, or, getting exposed to these really talented marketers that feed off of your desire for success, or that greed, and or that fear of missing out, right? And this once in a lifetime opportunity kind of things, we got to be really careful of that. And so for me, that was car shows, right? That was almost like my trigger at a certain level, because you go to these car shows, and there's nothing wrong with car shows in and of itself. This was a me problem where I found my identity in my car at a certain level, right? And so if somebody showed up with a car that was nicer than mine, then I felt inferior to that person, and I felt bad about myself, right? And so it was really important that I gotta kind of separate that. We'll touch on that in the next point as well. But removing myself from those car shows really, removed that that need for me to feel like I'm always needing to have that better, nicer, faster car, right? The other thing is kind of shopping malls, right? That's another thing. Is maybe there's going on a hike versus going towards to a shopping center that's maybe inundating you with things that you can buy, or things that maybe you can't afford right now, but it kind of almost is like rubbing it in your face, right? And so be careful where you're hanging out, because sometimes that can really impact what you're doing. And the other thing is YouTube. Sometimes you start getting on these trends of following certain people that maybe aren't conducive to where you're at in your life right now, and so making sure that maybe adjusting who you're watching on YouTube, because that's kind of like who you're hanging out with at a certain level, right? So being thoughtful there. Okay. So the third thing is that we want to talk about is, don't rely on things for your self-worth. So it comes back to my own situation, is that was I from how I was taught, getting into this career, is like, your worth is based off of how nice of a watch you have, how nicely you're dressed, how nice of a car you have. And so if I went into a situation where I didn't have my watch, I didn't have a nice car, I felt really uncomfortable and really not confident in myself, right? And that was, I still remember that feeling, and it's just, it's still hard, I mean, I think that's something that it's a constant battle because we're bombarded with this stuff, right? But I think we can't look at just our external possessions and using that to drive our self-worth, because that's just a very slippery slope. And I think it's hard to find contentment when we are doing that, because there's always something nicer, there's always something better, and somebody else also has something more than you have at some level. And so if we're always finding our self-worth in something external, you're always going to be on the other side of happiness on that. And so we got to be really cautious. And and Jesus says in one of his scriptures, it says, "Beware and be on guard against every form of greed, for not even when one is affluent does his life consist of his possessions." So that's, Jesus is telling us here, it's like we don't need to rely on our external possessions, because that our life is not our possessions, right? We came into this world with nothing, we're leaving with nothing. And so I think it's kind of, having that more of a different perspective on things really changes that dynamic quite a bit. Okay. And then the last thing that I wanted to break down is number 4 is to set a budget. So, at some level, what we found is that every spending decision really is a spiritual decision at a certain level, and it oftentimes can reveal where your heart is. And so when you sit down to do a budget, the saying goes is like, you show me your budget, I'll show you what you value, right? And that comes from this kind of this premise, because everywhere you spend money is you voting with your money to say, I value this. And so it's really important that when you fill out that budget, a lot of times, even when my wife and I go through it or go through it with clients, it's something that we look at and we're like, oh, geez, man, I didn't think when you lay it all out like that, it looked kind of bad from my angle, right? But maybe I forgot about these things, or maybe it looks like I'm spending a lot. For me, it was like, oh, maybe it looks like I'm spending a lot on my car, so I must find a lot of my self-worth in my car, right? Or is it maybe that I really want to value my family's safety and my family's protection, and so I want to have a nice car? Those are two different things, right? And so really making sure, it doesn't mean that having a nice car is a bad thing, but it's where's your heart when you're buying that, right? And so the budgeting exercise not only helps you do number 1 is spend less than you earn, but also helps you to identify kind of where's your heart with your spending, and is that really in alignment with what you'd really truly value here. And so the other scripture that comes to mind is where Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so that's another thing that really kind of reiterates this point of setting a budget, knowing how we're spending our money, and how are we actually being intentional in our finances here. So hopefully this has been helpful to kind of give you some different ways to combat this fake rich culture that we're kind of bombarded with on a daily basis, and hopefully inspire you to continue living more humble and quiet lives. And so thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next episode.